Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of 6 Feet Apart. Here back at Vermont Studio Center, our virtual programming. Today we've got my friend and roommate, Sarah Odsley, interviewing Valery Estabrook, who was a resident here just a few months ago. What a lovely person, and highly recommend following her on Instagram, doing some awesome cooking these days. Valerie was also part of our recent video show. Yeah, you'll see. Take it away, Sarah.
I'm here with Valerie Jung Estabrook, and you were a resident here in January 2020. Thanks so much for being able to be here with us to discuss your work.
Thanks. Primarily video and installation. I'm kind of in the process of going more towards performance, but at the same time, not leaving anything behind. So I'm really interested in mixing, I don't know, not the right word for it, like genres. And I think that, right now the best term for it is interdisciplinary, but at the same time, I don't know if that quite captures what it is I'm trying to do. I'm really interested in trying to find something that's more experiential, I suppose. But at the same time, coming from a person who makes things, knowing also that there are these physical artifacts as well. And also liking physical artifacts and making objects and that kind of thing. So how do I blend those things together in a way that feels like it makes sense, when you're talking about like an experience or a space or that kind of thing. So I do feel like there's a lot of, experimenting going on in my practice. And I feel like every time I do a project, it doesn't really look anything like the last thing I made, but it seems to be okay.
I vividly remember the videos that you showed during your resident presentation here at Vermont Studio Center. I wanted to kind of direct the conversation a little bit and to discuss how you utilize and craft race and identity in your work. Minor Feelings by Kathy Park Hong, and it's really good. Read like a couple quotes about it from it. So the title is Minor Feelings, and part of the definition of minor feelings is, she writes, as minor feelings are also the emotions we are accused of having when we decide to be difficult. In other words, when we decide to be honest. When minor feelings are finally externalized, they are interpreted as hostile, ungrateful, jealous, depressing, and belligerent. Effects ascribed to racialized behavior that whites consider out of line. And she writes, Asians lack presence. Asians take up apologetic space. We don't even have enough presence to be considered real minorities. We're not racial enough to be token. We're so post-racial. We're silicon. So I'm interested in the piece and the work that you did for Beautiful Face, and then also the objects that you made for the Thinly Worn exhibit that was a part of your show. For someone watching who hasn't seen the work, could you just describe it in a couple of sentences and then go from there?
Yeah, so it's two parts. There's a video and then there are masks. And the masks are made of pantyhose, and there are actually 10 masks, and they each are characters that I've kind of distilled from my life. And then the video that's paired with it is part performance, part found footage. And there's basically these segments, kind of like little mini chapters that kind of go through, each role, each mask, I suppose. And then there's this kind of conglomeration. And then the name of the video is Beautiful Face, but it ends actually with a Korean song that's like from the 60s. My mom used to sing a lot around the house, and I leave it untranslated purposefully, but for those who maybe go out and seek it, on my website or your website, the name of that song is actually like A Woman's Life. And so for me, it's also this idea of like, again, like living in this body that for me is a Korean woman, a Korean woman's body. And what is that experience like? My place to not just being Korean, but also like there's so many factors, right, of like being here in the United States. So that's kind of quick overview of, I made that in 2016, 2017, end of 2016, and kind of into the beginning of the next year. And I was thinking very much about, not just my personal identity, but during that time period, it was kind of the end of the 2016 election. And then Trump had just been elected, at the beginning of the year. And there were, more reports of hate crimes coming out. And in particular, I was also like reading experiences from other Asian Americans as well being targeted. And, it's not as if those things are new, they're not new. I think that it's just that with the internet, people are able to more readily share those experiences. So to me, it's not like, oh, it was just starting to happen. But I think that, we're at a place where we can know what is happening immediately. But anyway, reading those things though, it definitely kind of like dug up a lot of experiences that I had as well. And so that project was kind of an exploration to my identity as race, and then how that overlapped with how I'm supposed to, the expectations that are put on me as not just a woman, but a racialized woman, right? Parts of it that are kind of funny and parts of it that are kind of dark humor. I definitely use humor in my work, particularly like in my video work, because I think that when you're talking about really heavy subject matter, it's very difficult. I mean, I find it difficult to talk about things in a way that's just so, I don't know, like I need like a sideways entry point. Do you know what I mean? Like I feel like in a way the humor helps disarm people, and so that they're able to kind of like engage with that kind of material more honestly and kind of like with their defenses down. So I think that's important for me. And then also this, in a way, sometimes, especially when talking about really difficult things like racism, the whole, I mean, it's so absurd to begin with, like all these things that we're dealing with, that it's kind of like, if I don't laugh, then I cry. So it's like, I'd rather try to make something that I can poke fun at rather than just kind of like crumple into a sobbing mess, because that's like the only other reaction that.
You think that the viewer will experience humor? Do you test things out beforehand? But I'm intrigued by considering humor as a craft technique, like as a craft tool.
I mean, I don't really show anyone anything when things are in progress. So it's kind of like the first public presentation of thing is when I actually get reactions. And as far as whether or not I think it's funny, it's like I kind of just go off of my own sense of humor. Like it really, like the videos that I put out really are very reflective of my internal like headspace. It's like, what does Valerie find funny? Or like, what is Valerie thinking about? And like, sometimes it's funny, but also it's not that I'm necessarily trying to be funny and not necessarily trying to like elicit a laugh, but it's just like, there are things that are, like there's this, like sometimes there are things that are funny, but not haha funny.
How to make an egg roll, which you submitted to Vermont Studio Center's inaugural video show competition, and it was selected by Sandrine Schaefer, the curator for that show. And it was a really powerful moment for me to watch that video, and I'd never seen it before. And it's part of your how-to series. It subverts all of the expectations of the viewer. And I was wondering if you could talk about making that piece. I know that you referred to it as taking these right turns. So like you think you're going one way, and then you go the other way, and then you go the other way. And like, you don't know where you're going to actually end up as a viewer. It's funny, but it's like, it's not slapstick funny, it's unexpectedly funny, which is, I think, why it's so successful.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So when I was making those videos, I mean, that was the first video I made. I didn't know it was going to become like a part of a series, but it was the first one I was making. And I was really interested at the time, and I'm still interested in YouTube culture. And like when I'm making videos in particular, I try my very best to envision the space where it's going to live. So not for that video, the intended purpose was actually for it to be on YouTube, to be a disruptive thing with search terms for maybe someone actually literally trying to find like a egg roll recipe. And so for people who haven't seen it, it starts out with as a how-to video, how to make an egg roll. And I come on and I say that I'm going to show you how to make an egg roll. And then I don't ever show you how to make an egg roll. Like I put on like makeup, and then it turns into like slow crashing waves. And it's again, this thing where I was exploring YouTube and part of YouTube really excites me in like a wonderful way, and then other parts like really disturb me. And one of the things about the internet is that it's kind of a window into like human psychology, right? So you can see what other people are making. And so for me, I was going online and seeing like, oh, there's all these very innocuous makeup tutorials, but then there are all these how to look like different races makeup tutorials, you know? And I think that as like an Asian person, for whatever reason, like it's still like, I think that in some circles it's still acceptable to like dress up or look like Asian person or mimic Asian behaviors as costume or, you know, makeup or whatever it is, as something that you can just put on. You know, I found this whole little treasure trove of tutorials about, you know, how to look like a Korean person, like literally how to look like a Korean girl makeup, like how to look like Japanese, like that kind of thing. And so it was kind of this sideways reference to those. And if you watch the whole series, there's the last video is called How to Look Half Japanese. And that video most directly references those tutorials, because I actually take the found footage and chop that up and use that for the third and final video. But for the first video, I was really expressing kind of this inner tumult that I was feeling. You know, like for me, it was like, and I still get this feeling of like, I don't know how to express myself sometimes when all I want to do is scream, you know, like how do I, like this thing is really, really upsetting. And I think that kind of gets back to some of the quotes that you were reading of how am I allowed to express, you know, my anger, right? How am I allowed to express these feelings that are just so overwhelming sometimes that I'm not really even sure what to do with them. And so that video kind of shows again that the inner thoughts of me, it's like what's going on in my head. Literally, it's like if you could take like the frames out of my brain, that was what I was trying to do for that video. So it was like, oh, I see these tutorials and this is the first thing I think about, and then where does my mind kind of go to? And so for me, it's more about taking the viewer on that journey and how my thought pattern kind of jumps from one subject to another, but also like specifically in that video, it's more of an emotional journey, I think.
Mm-hmm. So you do a lot of different things. And I think that's like what I really admire about your work is that I feel like it risks your own autobiographical story in so many different mediums. For example, your immersive installation called Hometown Hero and in parentheses Chink. And I was wondering about the personal autobiographical information behind the making of that installation, and then also a story about the naming of that show. And I know that the word chink is a racial slur that certain people in today's 2020 year think that just doesn't happen. And with our current moment with coronavirus, it has been on the rise and even more prominent in that there was even an article in the most recent New York Times by Kathy Park Klong. I was wondering if you talk about your installation, which is currently on view and installed at the University of Michigan's Institute for the Humanities in their gallery.
Yeah, so that was actually my MFA thesis project. So I worked on that when I was a student the last year of my MFA, and then actually worked on it a year after that, because it actually took 2 years to complete, like for the entire, it's a full room installation. And the room consists of fabric. It's a completely hand-sewn interior. The furniture is all covered with the same chenille. It's like all soft chenille fabric in really muted dark colors. And then there's a video element, same thing like some of my other projects where it's somewhat performative, somewhat found footage. And as far as, you know, the autobiographical element, it's probably the project I would say that's most directly autobiographical. It's very much about my hometown. I mean, like that's literally what it is. It's about my experience growing up. And I started making it in 2015, particularly around that time. There was a lot of news around Confederate symbolism, Confederate flags. And I'm from a hometown my hometown is where the two main generals of the Confederacy are buried. And so General Lee and Stonewall Jackson are buried in my town. So I grew up around that historical culture. I was definitely indoctrinated to believe that, the South was an honorable endeavor and that these men were really honorable, and that, yes, slavery is bad, but, it was really the North that was at fault and all these things. And so, and I think that when I was a little child, I kind of accepted that just as, factual history because I was in this education system. But then as I got older, and also realizing a little bit more directly how things connect to, as I started to become like a young teenager. I mean, the thing is that I felt racism my entire life, probably even more as a smaller kid. I don't know how that's possible, but I think that it's just more that I didn't know how to avoid certain situations when I was really little. And then as I got older, it's like you learned survival strategies of like where not to go, who not, like you just avoid certain places and people after a while. And so I think that my direct experiences started to get fewer because I was just actively avoiding those things. But the flag, the Confederate flag, is something that to me says, it's like it was so directly associated with my racist experiences. It was like I can't pull them apart. But at the same time, it was like this ubiquitous symbol. Even today, when I go visit my mom, because she still lives in that area, if I drive, in one direction, half a mile down the road, there are Confederate flags in other people's, yards and stuff. And so it's something that I have seen literally every single day of my life growing up in that area. And yeah, I think that because it's something that I continue to see, and I have this very fraught relationship with my hometown in the sense of like, I love where I'm from and I love my friends that I grew up with there. But at the same time, like I don't have that same like warm, fuzzy, nostalgic feeling of just like, oh yay, I'm going home. I get to like be in this area. Like for me, it's always this kind of, I don't really belong kind of feeling, but at the same time, it's the only place I know to call home. And so the project is really about, what does that mean? Like to have the only place that you know to call home, never really feeling like you'll ever be a part of that place or ever being truly accepted as belonging in that area in a real authentic way. And so it's this very, the entire project is about this in some ways like grieving. I didn't think about it at the time when I was making it, but I feel like looking back, I realized that it was me grieving for not have that thing I never had, And so the space has a lot of Confederate symbolism in it. There's a Confederate flag in the space. There are portraits of the generals. I mean, for me, it's really a very literal depiction, like visual depiction of where I grew up. And then the video, which has me performing in it, that to me kind of represents my little, I don't know, so like my little consciousness in that space, it's like, that's the Valerie in the space, it's like the space is like that kind of represents this region. And then like the video is actually like kind of like my mind and my emotions. And so,
yeah, but I think that the role of that video, when I engage with it as a viewer, what feels empowering to me about that video is you're wearing a blonde wig and you're singing traditional Americana country songs or classic 50s songs. You can correct me on that time period, but what feels empowering about the video portion of that installation is that you're subversively reappropriating that and also messing with it because it's your face that's singing those songs, not a traditional white blonde American girl.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was definitely, I mean, even in the video, there's a voiceover, and the voiceover, I'm guessing you call it, it's custom written. It's not, it's made to like sound like a commercial that's found, but it's actually created. But the voiceover says, like, these are songs that you've heard over and over and over, and now they're yours. And so for me, it was that ability to say, like, there are still some things that are mine. Like there are mine, and you can't say that they're not mine just because of what I look like, or because, again, I think that growing up in the United States in a majority white community, it's, you feel very, I felt very assimilated. I feel very like distant from Korean heritage so much, like my only link I have to Korean heritage is like my direct immediate family, which for many years I didn't grow up around. Like I was really only raised by my mom, and then my dad, who is white. And then, we lived here, and it wasn't until my teenage years that I even met anyone else in my Korean family. So I didn't really have that much of a connection there, or at least I thought. But then at the same time, it's like you grow up in a place where you're told over and over again, like, no, you're Asian, like you're Korean. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely this kind of rooting through, like, okay, there's some confusion from when I was younger, certainly when I was younger. And then as an older person looking back, like, where do I feel confident in being able to take the things that I truly feel are mine now? There are some things about Southern culture that I absolutely connect with, one of them being country songs. Like, yeah, I've only seen, like, growing up, it was always like blonde white women, but it doesn't mean that I, don't connect with the lyrics and the feelings behind a lot of that music. And so, yeah, so for me, it's kind of like, what are the things that I feel like that I actually do feel confident in being able to say that are actually truly mine, no one can take away from,
Yeah. And claiming those and taking up that space is really matters, I think, for people of color and for people for second generation. Have you had any trouble with that? Any pushback on your work or the content of your work?
Not a whole bunch. I would say that the only a couple instances where I feel like I've had people kind of like push back on things. And for me, my hometown hero Chink installation, I am always very sensitive about where that lives. And it's been shown a number of times now. Like, it's now been shown in 6 different places in different regions too of the United States. And it is received differently depending on where it is and also the context. And usually it's like a really good reception. I think that people, once they see it, they understand. The only time I've had some negative response to it was actually when I showed it in Virginia. I was showing it at a place that was kind of like about an hour from where I'm from, and it was an academic setting. And I did actually get some essays written, because like often, if it's shown at an institution or something, like professors will assign like, oh, write a response. And a lot of times those people will share those written responses with me, which is really insightful for me of like, what are people receiving? And so I really like to read them. I want to know what people's honest feelings are and what are the thoughts that came after they saw it. Is it doing some kind of good, right? Because for me, it's about just like one little piece of this larger conversation anyway. But I was really interested to find that in Virginia, there were a number of essays I got back where people wrote that the South it was like all about defending the South and defending the Confederacy, and that I didn't do my research on the generals and that they weren't that racist and I shouldn't be like doing a thing that's criticizing them. It was just really strange. I was like, oh, okay, so the indoctrination's still obviously happening even for some younger generations. So I was a little disappointed about that, but it didn't feel reflective of my work. It just felt like, it just painted a picture of what was going on in general. And then the only other time was here right now at the University of Michigan. They had some pushback with the title being like displayed because of the word chink. And like, I understand like it's a slur, but for me, it was really important to keep the title as is. And then also, I mean, the whole reason why I named the piece Hometown Hero Chink was because that's who I feel like, that's who I am when I go home, like that's who I am. And that's how I'll always feel when I go home. So for me, it's really important contextually to the piece, because I mean, when I was making the work, like I said, it took me about 2 years to actually develop the entire installation. And in its first iterations, it was actually some of the objects in the room paired with essays. And a lot of the essays were very autobiographical. And it was all about that word, like my experiences with that word in my hometown. And I finally realized, like, I can just distill all of these essays into one word, like I don't need to share my diaries. Like I can just tell, like hometown hero Chink, that's me. Like I'm the Chink, like if anyone's wondering, like that's who I always felt like and always will kind of feel like whenever I go home. And so for me, it's really important that it sticks together as one.
When you were here as a resident, I remember you were working on sewing your own handbook, and you were also going to embed these spiral patches that had the ability to create sound within the fabric. And that fascinates me. And also, I was wondering if you are ever intimidated by learning the technology you need to execute a project, because it's really, like I'm just a writer. I just sit in my room and read and write poems and think about my life and try to distill some of my life into semi-autobiographical poems. And I'm really like kind of in awe of my visual artist friends who are so talented and also have these intrepid, like risk-taking personalities who are just like, oh, I want to try to this is my idea and I'm going to try to figure out how to execute this.
I am really intimidated to answer your question. I definitely get intimidated, but I mean, I think that with everything that I do, because I change materials so frequently, and again, like that's so rooted in with, well, what is the central idea and how do I manifest that in a way that is most true to the idea, regardless of my own skills and background, like how can I best serve that idea? And if that means a different material, a different method, a different technology, whatever it is, for me, I'm going to first, research that and figure out what is it that is required to pull it off. If I can try to pull it off myself, I'll do some more research and figure out how to do it. And if I can't, then I'll find someone who can help me, which I've done in the past. In order to execute what I truly have in mind, it's like, I'm not going to do that. I find someone else to do that. But as far as like the tech stuff, again, it just depends on what it is that I'm looking to do. And I think that the most important thing for, if anyone is like interested in figuring out, like trying to do things on their own, it's like knowing your own limits, I think is the most important thing actually. So for me, like I know where my abilities from a technical level stop. Like I can kind of figure out like maybe where I can push it and maybe learn a new skill a little bit, but at the same time, I know when things are like way out of my league, like I know when to be like, okay, I should just hire someone for whatever. But at the same time, it's like, if I know that things are within my capabilities, I'll push myself to figure it out and do it. It's like, look, there's so many people online that know how to do this, so many YouTube videos of other people doing the same exact thing. Like I can definitely figure that out. Like I'll just do a tutorial, see how far off I am, and then take it from there if I'm really, and just, it's just a lot of experimenting. But yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of things that seem more complicated than they are. That's the other part, right? But technology is wonderful. I don't know, I love it.
I totally understand. Like there's a certain amount of curiosity that goes hand in hand with the creative process. Mm-hmm. And following those, going down the rabbit hole is what I admire about like people like you and your work, and changing materials so often and finding the thing, building the tool you need to execute the vision is, yeah. So it seems like it's so fun too.
It is.
But yeah, I know the project you're working on now is making masks. And is it, and then I think in a previous conversation, we like touched on a little bit about like what it means to be making now in mm-hmm. COVID-19, this particular moment. I don't know if you want to expand on that.
I was seeing, I feel like most of us are kind of more active online naturally right now. And I was following a lot of people that, are in my community And I noticed like a lot of people being like, oh, this is going to be my residency, right? Like COVID residency or whatever, coronavirus residency. And I was thinking like, maybe I should just like hold myself up in my studio and get to work on the embroidered speaker dresses because they take so long to make. Yeah. And so I got all the stuff out for that. And then I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I can't, it's like I turn on the news and every time I hear anything, like listen to the radio or watch the news, I just hear about people dying, like all these people sick, everybody dying, everybody in need. And I am living, quite honestly, like a pretty comfortable life right now, like I'm very, very, very lucky. And, as an artist, I try my best to make things that in some way will matter to someone, but beyond that, it's like I do have the ability, I do have the means to make something as simple as a mask, right? So maybe that's what I should be doing, is that I am at least able to focus and at least direct my energy towards something that I know that someone else is going to be able to like use in a very practical way at this moment in time.
One of our traditions here at the Vermont Studio Center on Saturday night is to do karaoke, and we don't have to air any of this publicly, but I don't know if you feel like being silly right now.
Yeah, I could do it.
Okay.
Said he's going back to find a simpler place in time. Now I've got to be with him on that midnight train to Georgia. Hey, hey, hey. Yeah. I'd rather live in his world than live without him in mine. Song's going on. I find this very strange. It's like enthralling, but at the same time, it's so weird.
You look so good.
Really?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Thanks.
Perfect. It's the perfect back screen too.
I'm just here with my friends.
No,
these are my good
fans.
These are my fans.
And they're your fans.
I don't know them. I don't know. They just showed up. I think they crashed. They're not paying the hourly rate. Well, I certainly miss Vermont and certainly miss you.
Oh, we miss you. We miss having residents here.
It was a pretty amazing time.
You're great. Thanks so much for talking with me. And
thanks for spending time in my studio.
Wow, what a dream. What a dream they both are. Lost in a dream. Let's check in with Harlan with another life lesson.
All right, well, today's life lesson is we're going to put a trash bag into a trash can. And actually, this is the first life lesson. There's a lot of important things to know in the world. In this day and age, modern society. Like, let me get that set up for you. This is a big old trash can. Here's our big old trash bag. Air it out there. Set the big old trash bag into the big old trash can. Alright. Now a lot of people think that you're done right here. But there's more. Take this, pull it, twist it, twist it, twist it, twist it, grab it, twist like that, hold it, untwist, what actually makes it tighter, pop it through, grab that end here, slide that so it's tight, boom, you got a little pigtail here, now look, your trash can, you can't possibly, look at the suction on that, look at the suction on that, just look at that, you can't beat that, see it? That's how you tie a trash bag.
Yeah, I guess I never thought about that. Thanks for sharing, Harlan. Hey, y'all. Sorry, I am from Virginia, but like not the part where they say y'all, but sometimes that just seeps in. Check out some new calls we're putting up on the website. Very exciting. The broadside competition was awesome. Can't wait for you to see those coming your way soon. But see you next week.